Hello, and welcome to today's deep dive on Star Wars Episode 7 The Force Awakens. Now, before we get into it, and before I introduce my friend here, who we all at this point already know who he is, I'm going to say yes, Episode 7, even though it was never marketed that way, because that's what it is. Um, Today, we are here with Andrew once again to deeply dive into what happened during The Force Awakens. It was first released on December 18th, 2015, and it currently has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes out of a out of a out of 418 views. Of course, basically all that says is that out of those 800 wow, out of those 418 reviews, 93% of them give it a 60% or higher. Andrew, it's been, I'm sure, only a few weeks since you've seen The Force Awakens. This is the first time I've watched it since Last Jedi came out. So 2016, 2017, 2017. So after watching it this time, what are your overall thoughts?
I still like it. I may pick it apart, but overall, I still enjoy the movie. Um, there's a lot to it, and I think there's a lot in it that's still going to definitely play into the next movie when it comes out. And I think there's a lot of stuff that got, analyzed by everybody, but I think with more context, things will change a little bit, but we'll get into that.
I think that's going to come down to a lot, not only this film, but of The Last Jedi. But we'll talk about those kind of things when we talk about Last Jedi and when we kind of talk about our predictions for The Rise of Skywalker. Today, I want to try the best that we can to focus on
Just on this
The
one.
Force Awakens and maybe some of the things that it changed for previous films that we've already talked about. The first thing I want to talk about is the stormtroopers because it's a very big difference from what the stormtroopers we see in the original trilogy to the stormtroopers that we see at the very start of this movie. They can actually hit something.
Yeah, they're watching it, you can tell they're definitely a lot better trained, or at least portrayed in a better way than in the original films. The original films, they were red shirts, cannon fodder. That's literally what it was. They were there to get shot or to just stand around and look pretty.
I when we mentioned that when I think depending on how you want to play with it in your head, you see a lot more stormtroopers in the original trilogy than we do now, and it could very well be more quantity over quality for the original trilogy and quality over quantity here.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to look at it, and we discussed this when we were watching the movie, is when Finn gets let off the landing boat into the hangar, he's looking around it with just utter amazement, which kind of makes you wonder whether or not anyone really understands just how much power the First Order's got at this point in terms of ships and tech and troops.
You mean when Poe was was captured and taken up to
Yeah,
the Star Destroyer? You
yeah, he
mentioned
gets off
Finn,
and
and I
oh,
thought you meant when he
I
was
meant to
coming
say
out.
Poe. No, I meant to say Poe. He gets off and he's being led by two stormtroopers, and he's just looking around with like his jaw hanging.
It's like he knows about the First Order, but he doesn't know how powerful they really are.
Yeah, I think the First Order probably was trying to keep hidden how much strength they really had.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even in that opening sequence, you see the stormtroopers attack the village, and I mean, they're coordinated. They're shooting people, they're dropping people left and right. We pointed out the X-wing. I criticize the fact that I don't think the average blaster should be able to take down an X-wing, regardless of whether it's just kind of sitting there. I mean, how many times do you see the Millennium Falcon get shot to crap in a hangar?
Even in this one, it takes
Yeah,
a
in
couple
this one.
shots. It takes shots from.
But they get one shot off and disable his X-wing magically, miraculously. But the point is, they also coordinate enough to know, okay, we need to ground this thing before it can get away.
Yep.
I mean, they basically overwhelm the entire village in a matter of just minutes.
Yep.
Whereas, you see on Endor a bunch of Ewoks kicked about the same number of soldiers' butts, in a matter of minutes.
That's fair. That's actually an interesting point.
But I think it was also Abrams' whole view. He wanted to show them to be an actual military force because later in the movie, when they attack Maz's castle,
Takodana.
it's the moment they realize the X-Wings are coming in. It's all right, everybody move, get into positions. They actually put up
They tried to make some
defense.
kind of defense. Yep.
And it's a much more militaristic view of the Empire in this movie than I think in any of the other ones. In the other ones, it was just, oh, there's stormtroopers running around. Oh, that one's dead, that one's dead, that one's dead. Oh, I got shot in the shoulder by a lucky one.
Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind that. We talk about their training. They state within the Force Awakens that they're conditioned from birth, and that basically non-conformance means either you go back into conditioning or they're going to murder you. And Finn, he defects, and it's his first time of non-conformance. And Hux, General Armitage Hux, at least I believe this one is. I get the name of him and his father mixed up. And for the life of me, I don't remember the other name. So all I remember is Armitage.
I've only known him as Hux. He is more into the new expanded universe. I have not gotten into it ever since, the shakeup with the purchase, and the EU is now Legends. You ask me anything about any of that, and I mean, we've covered this in other reviews. I can tell you tons and tons of things. He, on the other hand, is currently up to date. I just have not had the heart to be able to. Well, you're more up to date.
I'm not fully up to date. But
you're more up to date than me. The point is he can reference things that I just can't. I have not had the heart to get into the new expanded universe.
But
just hard.
When we look at Finn, we go look at his defection. We see it most notably by people calling him traitor. We see he made this conscious decision not to kill innocents, not to go against what he was trained, or at least what he thought he believed in at the time. It leads to him helping Poe, leads to him saving Rey. It leads to him just wanting to be away. He just doesn't. He believes you can't beat the First Order, and that the best course of action is to run. But this is the first time in any of the films where we see a stormtrooper make a conscious decision not to follow the Empire the First Order.
First Order.
Well, you don't see that in the original trilogy, but that's more because they recruited their stormtroopers instead of bred them and basically brainwashed them.
That still happened. I mean,
we just never saw it in film.
Yeah. No, and in the film they were really meant to be just mindless peons anyways, so.
Yep.
One thing, I mean, we'll probably expand upon it a little bit, but it's like, you notice Kylo immediately knows what Finn's done in that sequence.
I wonder...
I mean, he just looks at him, and yet he lets him go. He doesn't get reconditioned.
He never made it to it.
No, he did. She said he reported to my division.
Oh, you're right. She did.
During the sequence, they were looking at his kid photo, and
yeah, they were looking at his whole file.
She said he reported to my division and then went back into service. So I'm guessing it was a slap on the wrist kind of moment. We're going to give you this chance to redeem yourself. Because, I mean, I think for him becoming a stormtrooper was his big break, so to speak. He went from sanitation to being a stormtrooper. And then he saw what the reality of the First Order was.
And I think you're right. He did get a slap on the wrist. They never talk about it during the film, but the relationship between Phasma and Finn... Phasma saw a lot of promise in Finn, trained her almost essentially on her own, which kind of almost made it like a general and his favorite lieutenant kind of thing. So she just takes his own weapon, slaps him on the wrist, puts him back out, and he's like, "Nah, I'm gone." Um, and it's kind of essentially Phasma's downfall, at least in this film.
Yeah.
Because if she'd have truly sent him back to reconditioning, um,
Poe wouldn't escape.
Poe wouldn't have escaped.
BB-8 would have been probably captured.
She wouldn't have been forced to take down the shields.
Mm-hmm.
And
In a lot of ways, though, it just leaves you to wonder about Phasma. I mean, you've told me some of her background, but it's like you look at her and it's like I don't know if her loyalty is truly to the First Order, if it's more a matter of she has this ideal that she wants to see brought about, and that's what she follows in, and that's why she hates Finn so much, is because he
goes against that idea.
Yeah.
There is a novel just called Phasma. It was released up to the lead into The Last Jedi. It's basically Phasma's backstory on how she became part of the First Order. She's from a desert planet called Panassus. Panassus. Basically, she's part of a tribe, and her only allegiance is to herself and trying to be better than what she was before. That's why she let down the shields. It was a matter of self-preservation, and it truly showed that she wasn't cared more for herself than the First Order. If she was truly for the First Order, she'd have let them kill her.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of brings us to, oh, you mentioned Kylo, and I want to kind of bring this up. He senses Finn, but what I want to know, this is the first time he's seen Finn. Is he sensing Finn with latent Force abilities? Because that was teased throughout the whole marketing of the Force Awakens, was that he was going to be the Jedi.
The next Jedi, yeah.
Was it his guilt or the conflict in him? What exactly is he seeing there?
It could have just been like force nudge kind of deal of, you got somebody who's radiating light. Think about it.
Yeah.
He literally basically just put his weapon down and wasn't willing to shoot innocent people. And just, for him, that was probably, I wouldn't say a Force awakening, but it was an awakening in himself, in which you're looking at somebody who's more aligned towards the light side of the Force, as opposed to somebody who's not.
I think I can get behind that. And we're talking about that specific scene. That scene right off the bat with the village really shows the power of Kylo Ren. Without even paying attention. He's just kind of looking about, talking to Laura Santeca, just cuts him down. And Poe shoots at him, and he freezes not only a blaster bolt, but Poe himself. And then holds that blaster bolt for 10 minutes? Maybe? Probably
He almost
not.
kind of released it as a message to Finn, though.
I think he held it basically to intimidate Poe, and then when he released it, he kind of just didn't care.
Yeah.
But we see things like that from Kylo throughout the film with his power. I don't want to talk about that final lightsaber battle until we actually
get
there. But with his the penetration of the mind, I don't know the name of that power or where it comes from, but he gets into Poe's mind with essentially no problem. And
he said he had some pretty good resistance. He just eventually broke him in the scene that they showed us.
Okay.
Nobody's been able to force from you, the location of the map, blah, blah, blah. And then he literally, had to rip it out of Poe's head. But, I mean, I think Poe's, Force sensitive, kind of, but not, he doesn't actually have any abilities.
Let's go ahead and break into this for a moment. I think Poe is force sensitive in the same way that Han is force sensitive. It affects the way they fly. Because when you look at the Battle of Takodana, Poe goes through 10 ships without an issue and is completely accurate.
He also manages to turn down the power of his X-Wing's blaster cannons enough that he's able to pick off individual stormtroopers and save the day. Sorry, I have a slight criticism on that in the simple sense that when you have a cannon capable of destroying starships, I don't think when you shoot a stormtrooper in the chest that it's just going to burn a little bit and he dies. I'm pretty sure he would have exploded and killed Han and Chewie. I think it would have been a much better scene if, because they were so confused by the attack, that Han and Chewie just basically, overpowered their captors and beat them.
It would have fit there, but
back to the Force.
When you look at Han throughout his life, even in that battle, he just kind of, real quick, doesn't even look. He just turns and shoots off the side.
But
and he looked kind of surprised from doing it.
Yeah, but I had to convince him of this. I mean, I think we covered a little bit of it in Return of the Jedi and then said we'll discuss it more later.
Or Solo.
I think we brought it up a little in Solo too, but we've been meaning to discuss it in this one because it's kind of a culmination of events.
Yeah.
I've always had a theory since before this movie came out, since before Solo even came out. I mean, this has been years before any talk of, Disney buying anything like that, that I've always believed that Han's got latent force sensitivities. Not like he can sit and lift up, objects and duel with lightsabers, but you notice that every time he refers to anything being luck, amazingly, there's more to it than that. I mean, he saves Lando Calrissian while he's completely blind from, he can see a light blur and a dark blur, but manages a precision shot
on a tentacle
to free Lando.
In
Solo, he had a few things, but then in this movie specifically, they almost made it quite obvious. Because he comes out, he shoots 2 stormtroopers in front of him, and then his arm just swings over and blasts another stormtrooper he didn't even see, and you just see him kind of just go, okay, and just keep moving on. And that's Han. He puts everything up to luck. The Force is hocus pocus. He believes it now. He says it in the movie when they're discussing the map and the Jedi.
Because of the things he saw Luke
But
do.
the thing is I don't think he doesn't have it in himself. But there's a later scene, right before, the final confrontation where they land on Starkiller Base.
Oh, yeah.
And Kylo Ren immediately just goes, Han Solo. He senses him. You don't see that anywhere else in the movies except when Ben Kenobi shows up on the Death Star. Vader goes, I sense a presence I haven't felt in, a long time.
It could be he's just sensing his father, but I think we see a lot of it. I think a lot of that comes from sensing another Force presence that can't hide themselves.
Well, I mean, look at Luke when they're infiltrating Endor. Vader immediately knows he's on that shuttle.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it can be the family bond, but it's also, I would have to assume it's got to be.
He knows that Force signature.
Yes.
We get a little bit of we're gonna have to think back a couple months back when we first started. Qui-Gon Jinn makes a comment about Anakin having Force, that's why his reflexes seem so fast, and that he just needed to be trained. Do you think that if Han would have been trained, would he have been capable of being a Jedi or at least lifting a rock?
I don't know. I mean, we could debate that one all day long because you have to remember
he would have been around 10 during Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, but he also was born in a core world, and the Jedi tended to find any children that were born in the core worlds. That was their whole point. If he'd been born, when they talk about Anakin, if he'd been born in the Republic, we'd have identified him much earlier, and he would have started training as,
True, because he would have been born sometime between...
Right around episode... between
1 and 2. Probably closer to 1, because I believe there are 10 years between 1 and 2. and
Yeah.
3. So yeah, it'd been like 3 or 4 years after episode
Yeah,
1.
I think he'd have been identified, if he was suitable of training. I think he's just one of those because, I mean, you see it throughout
The
the
expanded, the
universes.
old universe.
You have people who, I mean, you had, what was it? Was it the Grey Paladins? Or the Grey, I can't remember what they were called, but they were an offshoot. They weren't the Jedi. They weren't Sith. They weren't bad. They were a group of Force sensitives who didn't believe in the Jedi ways and just trained themselves the way they felt. I mean, look, I would have to assume that Han's got latent abilities. I don't know.
Just not
I
enough to
don't.
be
I don't
trained.
think he'd have been one who could be trained to be a Jedi, though.
Okay.
I feel like he probably didn't have the ability to shove things with telekinesis or any of that. It just made him an excellent pilot. I mean, heck, it would have been interesting to see him in a pod racer.
Oh boy.
I mean, look at his flying skills. He navigates a asteroid field against the odds. Everything he did was against the odds, yet he did it.
Yep. And I see a lot of that with Poe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how much luck was it that he got flung from that TIE fighter, able to pick it up without a problem, never flying one before?
Well, that's just
He's
technical skills.
Well, yeah, he's a great pilot, but we look at
He literally does a 180 arc over the sky and shoots down 7.
I counted 10 at one point.
Okay, 10. I wasn't counting. I was making a point.
But yeah,
he literally
you're right.
flies, pulls the trigger exactly every time he needs to, and drops them all, even though they're coming from different angles, and he couldn't have possibly seen them.
Yep. And I think, you see more of it in The Last Jedi with the way he flies, essentially being the only survivor of that battle, which we'll get to with The Last Jedi, because we have, I'm sure we're going to have some thoughts on that battle.
Mm-hmm.
So there really isn't much else to say about Poe. Especially when you look at him not meaning to survive Jakku. It's been years, but I'm fairly certain there was a report that JJ didn't plan on Oscar Isaac being in as much of the film as he was, and it took his performance to have him rewrite scenes and then bring them farther in. But we're talking about Jakku. We can't talk about Jakku without talking about Rey.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say that I enjoyed Daisy Ridley's performance. And I don't think she's a Mary Sue. There's been so much about her being a Mary Sue. I don't look at it that way.
No, I think she's got street smarts.
For anyone who doesn't know, Mary Sue is basically a woman character. I can't think of there's a different term for male character who can do anything better than anyone at any time without any explanation. So we come and we see that she's a skilled fighter, right from the get with the protection of BB-8. Sure, it's not a lightsaber, but she kind of gets the idea. Don't touch the shiny end. So she can do force trickery on a incognito James Bond without any training.
I gotta say it. We were watching this time, and I just looked at him and went, the greatest mission of James Bond's career. He infiltrated the First Order to aid the Resistance. For those of you that don't know or didn't hear, that was Daniel Craig in the Stormtrooper armor. He happened to show up on set, and because he was such a great fan, they decided, hey, yeah, we'll stick you in the movie.
There were 3 or 4 watches before I recognized it, and the only reason is because of the speed of his voice. And they tune it just enough, the idea that it's coming through the helmet, that it's hard to tell. But once you understand it, once you can tell, you hear it every time. So Rey's able to concoct this, but it's not until Kylo Ren kind of goes into her head and starts messing with her, and she starts gaining confidence from essentially battling him.
Well, she learned about Darth Vader through that encounter, which she'd have no reason to even know who Darth Vader was.
She thought Luke was a myth.
Yeah, I'm assuming she probably just heard stories in, the port that she lived in. But, when I say street smarts, you have to figure we see in a vision at one point when there's a ship flying away, she's got to be what, 5, maybe 3,
Somewhere between
4.
somewhere around there. We will talk about that.
A girl like that who has to literally survive for the next how many years on her own in a
10, 15
in a tiny backworld settlement. I'm sure she went through a lot
with
and
with
actually
no hope, no family, because she was given to Unkar Plutt, and he
he just kind of set her off on her own to do her thing.
and
But
I do think that she worked on the Falcon based on how quickly she picked up flying
she
it.
knew about
she
it.
knew about it.
Yeah.
I believe there's a legend story where she cleans it. Don't quite remember. But
Well, I'm sure she fiddled with it.
She
She knew
gets-
the history of how he got it. She just didn't know it was the Falcon.
Yep. She got a lot of technical readouts because she scavenges Imperial star cruisers and AT-ATs for her leisure.
She's self-sufficient in regards to survival and everything she's had to do. She's naive in the way of the galaxy. She's never left the planet. She sees Takadana, and she's never seen that much green.
Yep.
And then you see the sequence when he's trying to force the map out of her, and he's talking about, oh, I see the ocean and I see the island. And, well, how could she visualize that? She's never seen it before, and that's the first clue to the fact that the Force is talking to her and telling her she needs to go find Luke.
So it's not the fact that she's a Mary Sue. The Force is working through her without her realizing it.
Well, there's that. I think she may have picked things up from Anakin or Ben's mind.
When she was in Ben's mind, yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
She picked things
I'm
up,
sure that's
but I
where
also think her the lightsaber, all that stuff, I think is the Force basically helping her. She is channeling most of her abilities in terms of the Force.
There is a line out of Last Jedi, which I hate that we constantly go to, but it helps. Snoke says, "The darkness rises, and the light to meet it."
Mm-hmm.
It's the Force working through her, much like the Force worked through Anakin, worked through Luke.
Yeah, but the one thing you don't notice it a lot. It kind of takes the next movie to start seeing it more and going back and looking at this movie. There's a lot of anger in her that she hides. She's keeping it buried throughout this movie. I mean, you see a point she finds out that BB-8 goes, oh, that guy stole my master's jacket. Next thing you know, she comes over and just looks angry and lays him out.
And the face expression she makes after Kylo cuts down Finn and she pulls the lightsaber.
Well, and then she draws on the Force and pretty much uses her anger to lay him out. So,
granted, we'll talk about that a little bit more
we'll
because there's a lot more minutia into that battle. But I hate the fact that people call her a Mary Sue when she's really not. I mean, she's
had a lifetime of experience.
Spade a spade. If she's a Mary Sue, Anakin's a Mary Sue. Destroying that droid control ship.
Look at Finn.
Yeah.
Finn's more of a Mary Sue than anything, but they also play him off as he actually doesn't know that much. He gets lucky. And
he can wield a lightsaber because of that baton. You don't know it. You have to go back and read the supplementary works. But he was trained in the baton staff. The battle that he had with the guy with the staff, they trained together.
Yeah, basically, I mean, they trained in that kind of combat because I think, the First Order knew if they had to go up against Luke. Which, I mean, the reality is no average trooper had any chance against Luke, but...
Not in his prime.
No. Plus, the way they played it out, with him with the whole lightsaber sequence... I sent him a video. I'm not going to say where I got it because I can't even think of what the page is called. But there's I don't know if maybe it's director commentary on the Blu-rays or what, but I watched a video of the sequence with director commentary, and they basically talk about Kylo Ren's playing with him. I mean, it's literally just a brawl.
With Finn.
He's just playing with Finn. It's a brawl. But the moment you see Finn nail him in the shoulder, he literally lays Finn out.
I didn't recognize. I can't believe I didn't recognize until this moment. It correlates with the Return of the Empire Strikes
Empire
Back battle,
Strikes Back with
where
Vader getting
Vader's
hit.
messing with Luke until Luke gets a shot on his shoulder,
And then he cuts his
same
arm
shoulder,
hand
I
off.
think, and just
This
cuts him down.
shoulder.
I think it was the same shoulder.
I'm visualizing. Yeah, same shoulder. It was the right shoulder.
So it's those little visual cues that call back, that make all these callbacks. We have that's essentially everything Ray does. It really is essentially everything Ray does.
This movie was more an introduction to Ray
all
and
of
to
Ray,
Finn.
Finn, and Poe.
Yeah, but Poe don't get nearly as much screen
No,
time.
but that's because he wasn't anticipated to be throughout the
Mhm.
film. We mentioned the only person we didn't mention is Leia, but she's not in this film a lot.
No, she's got some brief appearances. There was a scene. There was a scene. It was highly criticized. At the end of the movie,
Very end. Yep.
Chewie loads Finn onto a
Metal
conveyor
gurney.
vehicle to get treatment, and then walks right past Leia. Leia walks by, doesn't acknowledge him, and goes straight to Rey. A lot of people criticized it.
And JJ came out and said that was a mistake. If he did done it again, he'd have had them hug.
Me being fair, I told him today, my view on it is, I didn't notice it the first time around. Once people started criticizing, I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? Maybe Chewie just doesn't want to talk right now. He's lost literally his longest friend. And he knows probably that Leia is well aware of that. Because,
As far as we know, that's how Wookiees grieve.
he sits off
we
by
see
himself.
him during the very final scene. Well, not very final scene, but the next scene. He's off in a corner on his own and nothing to do with anybody. Even when they show the map, I don't think he's in that scene. I don't think he's in that screenshot.
No, I think he's off to the side. He might be looking, but I don't think he wants to be bothered.
No.
And then
And you
got
don't bother a
Leia,
Wookiee.
who literally, I'm sure everyone told her that Rey and Han were kind of, Han kind of took her under his wing. I'm sure they probably told her when they were
I'm
there
sure
the
there was
first time.
there was an off-screen conversation.
They were kind of like with Maz and Han. But
I still think that conversation and the way that Han looks at her when they first meet, there's something more about Rey. But we'll talk about that when we lead into
later
the
on.
Rise of Skywalker.
But it's one of those things, Leia goes straight to Rey, and it's like, I think she probably, in some ways, kind of felt connected to Rey because she went through similar. I mean, she's captured by the Empire, tortured.
When she was Rey's age.
Yeah, when she was the same age, and everybody went out of their way to rescue her, just like on this one. They literally led one of the most dangerous missions in recent history to both save Rey and the Resistance.
You just put that together. You just said that, and it brings me to draw the correlation to A New Hope. Saving her on the Death Star, same as saving Rey at Starkiller Base. The oldest member of the party outside of Chewbacca dies in the attempt by the
Villain.
by the helmeted villain.
Mm-hmm. Well, he wasn't helmeted, right?
Well, not when he did the killing, but
no. Now I think we get to discuss Kylo.
yeah, I think that's really where we're at. The First Order in general, because we didn't talk about Snoke.
We had a discussion. We're saving it for later. I feel it's more along the lines. I'm just going to give my opinion of the character currently in the movie in regards to just how they built him and how Driver played him.
We have some theories about where he comes from that I think is best saved for predictions because I think it'll be brought out more in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. So I like the character personally. I like Adam Driver. I do.
Great actor.
In this movie, I liked Kylo Ren far better. I'm talking with the helmet. For me, it's like, he's just so much more intimidating. But we had a discussion about him versus Vader. Vader's just got the confidence. He knows everybody's terrified of him. Whereas when you look at Kylo Ren, there's one sequence when he's going to meet Han for,
he's walking into the oscillator.
He's walking in, just the way he walks, the way they filmed it. He literally just has this overwhelming sense of just malevolent purpose. You don't see it from Vader except maybe in
Maybe Rogue One down the
when
hallway.
he's killing everybody.
Yeah.
But with Kylo, he's able to exude just this utter sense of just terrifying purpose just in that short little march down. I mean, and you just get this sense he's got his rage literally
It's probably the only
right
time
under
he's
the
got
surface.
his rage controlled.
Yeah, it's just right there. But I mean, it's in the movie. I wasn't a big fan when he took the helmet off in this movie.
Perfect hair.
Well, it wasn't that. It took me a little bit. I hadn't seen Adam Driver, in acting at all prior to this. But I think honestly he's the perfect person for it after what he's done with the character. In this movie, it went from I really love this villain to he took the helmet off. Now I got to get used to a different character because with him between the helmet and
he's
he's
different characters, and I get the idea on why you would take the helmet off. You're with Rey in the sequence with Rey. You're trying to show that you're human, that you're not equal, but closer than just a what did she call him? Disfigured monster. Monster was the word. And then with trying to reconnect with Han on the bridge, he takes the helmet off.
Mm-hmm.
So I get what it fits story wise, but when you see him with just the helmet, you instantly correlate him with Vader. He comes on screen, and I think the helmet itself commands its presence.
I think they did amazing with it. Prior to the film coming out, I had a lot of doubts. I was still angry about all the changes they've been making. He told me about, the villain's going to be somebody named Kylo Ren. I saw a screenshot. I'm like, cool helmet. The movie reassured me once I watched it, which, I mean, I still had my issues, but I think that's more just the kind of petty stuff. That I kind of held on to this anger because I just felt betrayed by, like, Kathleen Kennedy and whatnot. I mean, I don't feel betrayed by George Lucas just because I don't personally care about George Lucas.
He had nothing to do with this one anyway.
Well, it's not even that. I think he personally just kind of threw the Star Wars universe to the wolves a long time ago. So
we probably have an hour conversation on
yeah,
that
we
alone.
could.
Well, let's talk about the big thing that happens. There's one ending, so to speak, and the way JJ filmed it with the light and the death of Han Solo is masterful storytelling. You have blue light coming in from
the
sun draining, and you have red light from the lights inside the oscillator, and you can see the oh dang it, I've lost the word. The conflict within Kylo based on the lights. He's blue, so he's not really knowing what's going on. And then as soon as it goes red and his face is all bathed in red, he knows what he's going to do.
He's certain.
That's his quote unquote come to Jesus moment where he decides you're dead, you're done. And it takes a second, but Han finally realizes it, has fear, and that's when he's impaled and falls off the bridge. It's masterful storytelling.
Well, I mean, if you look at Han when he's talking to Leia begs him to bring him back, and it's just the look on Han's face. I don't think he had any hope anymore. I think he felt Ben was a lost cause. But he was willing to do it for both Leia's sake and for Ben's sake if he could. Yep. And you almost feel like there's this look of surprise on his face when Ben basically is offering him the lightsaber, like, okay, you win, I'll come back with you. And there's just this surprise, like, oh, I actually succeeded, and then when he can't take the lightsaber from Ben's hands.
Do you think that it was that surprise in Han that caused Kylo to kill him? Here's my thought.
I mean, this is all conjecture. But
well, yeah, I mean,
I can buy into that. No, the thought is, oh, Dad, you doubted me. Another doubter, because I mean, we discover in the next movie something in that regard. We'll
basically
discuss.
With Luke,
but it's one of those things of,
just another person that didn't think I was worth anything.
Didn't believe in me.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't put it together, but yeah, it seems that way. At least to me.
This is going to lead into Last Jedi. I think we're going to have to carry this part of the conversation
you're right.
over because there's more in that one that's going to tie in.
I think you're right.
So,
it makes me wonder, and is going to eventually lead from into Last Jedi and probably into Rise of Skywalker, because it feels the same way about his relationship with Rey.
Yeah. We'll have to tie all
Yeah,
that in.
and we actually probably get more of that in Last Jedi because they have a lot of it together.
But yeah, I don't know.
But I could see. No, not necessarily. We can talk about that whole battle, but first, before we get into that, the theory that you have on hyperspace.
Oh, yeah. How it's basically a pick and choose how you want to use it by the creators and writers throughout the entire series. I mean,
because this leads right into the battle. We might as well talk about it now. Because
so basically every single movie in the entire history of Star Wars plays around with hyperspace and changes everything in pretty much every single movie. You get an Empire Strikes Back. My lord, if the Millennium Falcon did go into hyperspace, they'd be on the other side of the galaxy by now. They'd left a half hour ago. Oh my god. And then they talk about, you got hyperspace routes, which means you got to jump, drop out, jump somewhere else. And yet every single movie you see, and including the map, you made a point. That is a very,
very jagged map.
And yet, hey, we're going to jump in.
You only see one jump
in. And it's going to take us 30 seconds. And then
I get the idea of cutting it down the space of time for time.
But they really go overboard in this movie. But I mean, it's like another reference. Look at they escape Tatooine in A New Hope, and it's like a half-hour flight to Alderaan. But in other movies, we're going to jump into hyperspace. We're there. And then you got the Battle of Endor sequence. And this is going to tie into my complaint here. So the whole point of the insertion onto Endor was to take down a shield generator that protected the Death Star. They had a time frame because the fleet was going to be arriving anytime, and up until, all through the entire series, you could not communicate with people in hyperspace. Once they jump, there's nothing you can do. They're going to be on their way. They're going to be arriving at a relatively set time. And that was the whole point of trying to knock the shield down before the fleet arrived, because if the fleet didn't realize the shield wasn't down, they'd all crash into it and blow up. And we get to Starkiller Base. Basically, all intents and purposes, Poe and his assault group are all sitting in hyperspace right outside Starkiller Base, just twiddling their thumbs, waiting for a radio call to go, "You can attack now, Poe." Yep, you guys who are literally floating next to each other can drop out of hyperspace right on top of Starkiller Base. Wow, you guys just completely defeated the whole point of hyperspace.
From a scientific point of view, anyway.
Well, scientific and all the other movies. The only other movie... I mean, they even make a point with, in Rogue One, call off the fighter attack. Oh no, they're already engaged. Yeah, because they dropped out of hyperspace and attacked the base. They weren't sitting in hyperspace waiting for an order.
Waiting for the order, yeah.
The Millennium Falcon, we have to jump in and drop out of hyperspace at the precise moment. Otherwise, we're going to hit the planet. We couldn't just sit outside and wait until we could move forward to go in. No, we had to drop out at full velocity. So it's one of those things of, I think they took a few liberties too far on that.
Which I can agree with. Now, the weapon... I've seen a lot, at least when it's released.
Yeah.
A lot of how could they see the beams destroy these planets? How could it even work? Well, I'm not going to get into how it works, but it's a hyperspace weapon. The beams go through hyperspace, so they're large and moving faster than the speed of light.
Basically, he had the question back then. I actually bought the movie digital before he got it, so he wasn't able to rewatch it. I happened to watch it and notice that Sam Wexley actually describes how a weapon works. It was a It was a
I don't remember how.
I don't remember how he
described
phrased it. Basically, when it fires, the energy is transmitted into hyperspace, allowing it to travel great distances faster than the speed of light. At this point, it's entirely feasible that they could have seen it from Takodana. I can never get it pronounced right. From Maz's palace.
Pretty close.
It is quite feasible for them to see it because at that point the light and particles would be traveling at a much faster velocity, anywhere from, well, if you want to work with science, if they're in hyperspace and you can travel across the galaxy in, say, an hour, it's thousands of times the speed of light. So they're going to be able to see it. The issue I brought up was there would be no sound effects of planets exploding, a system or two away.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they actually, for most movies get these plot holes. We're going to build this doomsday weapon. We're not going to explain how it works, and people are going to question it endlessly. They actually put in a pretty good explanation. It's just literally a 2-second clip, explanation from Sam Wexley during the briefing.
And
it's a hypervelocity or hyperspace cannon.
And I get the fact that this is science fiction fantasy.
It is.
So, I mean, you can take your liberties, but as long as I kind of understand the thought process, I'm good.
My view has always been, so long as it fits within the physics of the universe you've created.
Stay consistent.
Yeah. And the thing is, there was a documentary years back where you had some scientists pick apart Star Wars and claim, oh, none of that can happen. Well, here's the thing.
Don't we have things now that essentially could make
They don't
lightsabers?
even have. We have cell phones that do everything. Data pads that they explained as being these big, bulky, heavy tablets can do.
That's the Star Trek.
The point is,
current. Yeah.
These scientists said, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Well, how the heck do we know? The universe of Star Wars has had 20,000 years of technology, roughly, if you want to go way back when.
And they're starting to find that we can control plasma in these ways with magnets.
We can make windows out of plasma.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do tons of things that they didn't even think of in Star Wars. And that actually Star Wars helped drive the technology for it, including Star Trek did the same thing.
With cell phones and communicators and stuff, yeah.
The fact is I think they did a good job of explaining how that weapon worked while keeping it inside their universe. Yep. They just kind of screwed up on how hyperspace works when it comes to travel. Yeah.
So, I can't think of anything else to talk about, so we might as well get to the main event. The lightsaber showdown between Kylo and Finn and Rey. Mm-hmm. Unless there's something else that you can think of that we should talk about before that.
Why not Maz?
Okay, let's talk about Maz, because Maz is 1,000 years old. and
she knows the Force.
She knows the Force, but she's not a Jedi. And somehow, story for another time, which we still don't have, she's got Luke's lightsaber after he lost it. And
we never did discuss the vision.
We didn't.
We'll get there after Maz.
Yeah, let's talk about Maz because that'll lead into the vision. So, Maz knows things about the Force. She's essentially, and you might say this is blasphemy, she's the sequence's Yoda.
I was going to say Obi-Wan. Because this sequence has Yoda.
Okay.
I would say I guess you could throw Han Solo into the role of,
of Obi-Wan being that first mentor,
first death, whereas she's more of the wise, she sees more than everybody else and tries to explain it.
It's a very interesting thought, because I would always looked at Luke as the Obi-Wan role, but you're right, he's more of a Yoda role. Kind of different. They're very different on their philosophy, but yeah, okay, I can get behind that. But I called her the Yoda role because she knows the Force. She's 1,000 years old. She knows
Yoda.
Presumably. She just knows everything, and the only thing she doesn't know is who Rey is. I mean, she can look at Finn and know, you're afraid. She doesn't say that that's not okay.
But to be honest, he does kind of call her out on it, though.
True.
He makes a point of, you don't know where I come from, you don't know what I've seen, and
you don't know the why.
You don't know why I'm terrified.
And she kind of was like,
Okay.
Okay, those guys.
Well, I think it's one of those things of I think she expected him to childishly defend himself, and when he did so in a basically a wiser way,
He was
he
intense.
got respect.
He was intense and not whiny.
But yeah, when it comes to Rey, there is this sequence where Rey chases Finn, and Maz looks at Han and is just like, "Who is this?"
Like she saw more in Ray, and she truly saw
And of
more
course,
in
they
Ray.
cut away, so we don't know the contents of the discussion.
There's a few times where Han looks at her like he knows
Something.
And there's a. I still go back to when Kylo gets told that they disappeared with the drive, and he's like, "What girl?"
Yeah, I mean, they put these little sequences in that make you
It's
wonder if people
JJ
don't know
creating
things.
that mystery box
Because it's like, well, there's one more thing. What is that? They were helped by a girl. What girl? At which point it's like he's looking to potentially kill this guy.
and
Then you get Han looking at her like, huh, on the Millennium Falcon a couple times. He tries taking her under his wing to look out for her, and then there's a discussion that they purposely don't show you.
Yeah.
Which leads right into Rey discovering Luke's lightsaber that Maz has.
And this lights the whole idea of Rey's history. I'm sure we'll get more of it in Skywalker, but Last Jedi changes it, which we'll talk about. But that box was there and just kind of ignored in The Last Jedi. And I hope we get more on it. And it's kind of interesting to see how it'll play into. And I'm sure when all's said and done with it.
I think Maz will tell the story in Skywalker. They brought her into the next movie, even though it was brief. They're keeping her into the universe.
Yeah.
So I think she's might come out as being the Luke or Yoda figure in Skywalker.
We'll see how that plays out. But she somehow managed to get the lightsaber. The lightsaber calls to Rey, and we get this vision. The very first scene is...
Looks like Bespin.
It looks... And they stated that they were going to do basically a different viewing on the Luke Vader battle, and Rey was going to watch it. But it seems like they actually cut the battle and just kind of gives you the corridor with there's some Vader breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there lightsaber sounds in there?
No, it's just Vader's breathing. The corridor lights up. It's very familiar to when Luke was evading Vader on Cloud City. It's that corridor.
Oh, yep.
Then it tips over into a scene. You say it's after Luke's temple's destroyed, which I'll agree with. I have this theory that Luke put R2 to sleep using the Force so that R2 would not awaken with the rest of the map until something occurred. I don't know. It doesn't happen until Rey shows up.
Yep, and it'll probably be discredited, but I had that theory for the longest time too. Because before The Last Jedi, I thought Luke was playing a long game and just was waiting for a reason to show up.
Yeah. He may still be. I mean, who knows? I mean, what his real motives were. He was... Yeah.
Does that lead into...
Then it twists over into showing a child Rey who, and this is why I'm only going to reference it, they reveal Rey's parentage in the next film, and I feel like this vision completely shoots it down.
Yeah.
Before they even put it into a movie. Because she's basically being held by
Unkar Plutt.
Unkar Plutt, who's telling her to be quiet, but she's looking up at a starship flying away, screaming, "Come back," which tells me that either her parents or parent or somebody that knows her parents or whatever is flying away on that ship.
Which is why she always wanted to go back to Jakku and be there, because she felt like they were always going to come back.
Because we discussed it. He brought up how she kind of seems a little childish sometimes. She's got these toys, she's got this stuff. And my thing is she's waiting. She's got to find ways to entertain herself. It's not that she can't leave. There's ships leaving. That's why she
can speak binary. Yeah. That's why she can speak Wookiee.
Well, it's just it. She lives on this planet where she's basically learned all these skills that would make her perfect for any ship crew. She could leave anytime she wants. But she won't do it, as miserable as she is.
Yep, because she's waiting for her family.
But then it tips from that sequence, which I think we'll cover more later.
I think we'll talk a little bit more about
my
it.
issue with that. And then it tips into
Kylo and the Knights of
muddy
Ren?
battlefield with dead bodies everywhere. Rey sees Kylo Ren. Behind him are what we assume are the Knights of Ren.
Pretty sure. Yeah.
And then Kylo basically storms his way towards her. Then it cuts to a future scene for her. Basically, it's the future with her on
it's the final
Starkiller Base.
it's the final battle that we'll talk about here shortly. It's really, this sets up that mystery box. We get the past. I mean, even Yoda's voice is heard within this vision, and we get Obi-Wan,
old Obi-Wan.
We get Alec Guinness Obi-Wan and Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan saying, "Rey, these are your first steps."
You'll miss Rey though, if you're not paying attention.
Yep, because that's the trickery that they used. Alec Guinness' voice and I don't remember what word they said they pulled it from, but they were able to change.
But it shows up like midway through, and then there's like it just kind of goes Rey, and then it's a little bit, and then you get at the very end. You get these are your first steps.
Yep. And it's you think about it and you go, what? Well, that's the Force Awakening within Rey. That's really the very beginning of her, the Force coming into her. Well, not the very beginning, because she's such a good where she's been and what she's done.
It's more like she's awakened to it.
Yeah.
She didn't believe it before. It was still all hocus pocus.
It wasn't.
It was all still legend.
Yep, until she had that vision and was like, "What's going on?"
Is it terrified her? Maz comes down, tries to counsel her, but it doesn't work. She runs off. Maz was trying
to get her to take the lightsaber to Luke.
Maz makes a point of saying, "This was Luke's lightsaber, as it was his father's before him, and now it's calling to who?
Why is it calling to you?"
Yeah.
So there's more to her than we know.
Yeah. And I just feel like the next movie's just basically camo. Yeah. I don't know what the phrase is. There's a phrase for it. Throwing dirt in people's face. Kind of deal. Yeah. But
sand to the eyes kind of thing.
No, and then Maz, kind of counsels Han, Chewie, and Finn, gives them the lightsaber and tells them to get it to Luke, I think. She knows Luke needs to come back.
Yep, and she feels that that lightsaber will bring him back into the fight.
She's also telling Han, you need to stop running.
You need to get back. What did she say? It's
you've been running from this fight for too long.
It's time for you to get back in the mess or something like that.
Plus, she's got a thing for Chewie.
Which is funny. She comes up to his knee. But Maz is played by Lupita Nyong'o. You see her in 12 Years a Slave. You see her in Black Panther. She's an amazing actress. She does great work with Maz, even with the performance capture.
Yeah, I like Maz. I like the character.
Drastically underused in The Last Jedi, but we'll talk about that next time.
Well, I think, yeah, we'll discuss that.
Yeah. So this brings us to the last part of the vision, which is the battle on Starkiller Base. It starts with just a showdown. Basically, there's talking about what does Kylo say to Finn and Rey? No, that was
before. We're not finished yet.
We're not finished, and Rey's like, "I'm gonna shoot you," and he's like, "Nah,"
and throws her into a tree, goes unconscious,
and then he starts yelling "traitor."
Well, Finn runs over, grabs the lightsaber. He knows it's a weapon, and it's like. And then you got
all he wants to do throughout this film is protect Rey from the first moment he meets her. That's all he wants to do.
She's the first person to ever look at him like he's not a monster or
just a faceless soldier.
So basically, he picks it up and Kylo just screams "traitor" at him,
and then he recognizes what he's holding.
Well, there's that, but he recognizes that, but I think that was also the turning point for Finn. It's like, don't call me traitor.
Yeah, that's essentially where.
So they duel, and with the commentary cut, it talks about the fact that it was really meant to be Kylo just toying with him. Oh, you think you can best me in a lightsaber fight? Okay, bring it on. So they.
And I have to point this out, right? Kylo is dying at this point. The whole
Oh
movie
yes,
sets up the
I was
point
getting
that
there.
the bowcaster, that Chewie's bowcaster, it's essentially blows up stormtroopers, and Kylo takes one to the hip.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. Kylo is using that pain, like he's intentionally inflicting pain to increase his power, his
Yep.
anger, and his hatred, in order to basically power himself up for this fight.
Yep.
Um, I,
And he you're
there are
right.
a
He
lot of
does.
references in developing Kylo's character. I feel like they took a lot from the Jason Solo of the original expanded universe.
Absolutely did.
And there's sequences I think similar to that where Jason did the same thing. But the
I
point
can't
is,
think of anything in particular, but I'm sure
it
there
might have been a
was.
different character that did it. I can't remember. It might have even been Anakin Solo because basically the more wounds he got during his death
Oh,
sequence,
that was during his death sequence.
he
Yeah.
basically got more powerful. The same thing happened to
Koran?
no,
Horn?
the guy who held the Senate doors against the Yusin Vong.
That was Koran Horn.
No, that wasn't Corn.
I thought that was Corn.
No, that was they called it. They end up like creating a god.
Yeah,
after
the
him.
Yusin
That
Vong think
wasn't
of him as a
Horn.
god.
Horn didn't die.
But I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
For the life of me, I can't remember. He was
If you haven't read the New Jedi Order series, that scene there is one of the best pieces of writing I've seen out of any.
Was that Lucino that did that one?
I don't remember
that
Basically-
series is 20
Yeah.
books long.
Jason goes in to twist the world brain or convince the world brain to rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And outside it was a guy named like Renner or something.
Was it Kyle? It wasn't Kyle Renner, because Kyle was a member of the council.
No. They called it like the something and I don't remember. But basically, this guy takes on an entire army and piles bodies, 50 feet, 100 feet high, and only dies when they bring down the entire building on him.
Yeah.
But we're off track. But the point is,
yeah.
they when they built Kylo Ren's character, they took and even this whole series so far, you can watch, and there's a lot of things that they took and repurposed from the old universe.
Absolutely.
But it's like you see him beating on that building, his rage, and we talked about it a little earlier in this video. He basically has this toying fight. It goes back on.
I know, but don't mind me. Just continue.
Toys with Finn, and then Finn managed to get a lucky blow on him, and it's like, all right, I'm done playing with you. He just runs his lightsaber right up Finn's back after kind of torturing him by stabbing him in the shoulder with his crossguard.
Yep.
The sound of his screams are what brings Rey to. But you don't see that. I mean, she starts coming around.
I can see where you're coming from, yeah.
And so Kylo goes and attempts to grab, use the Force to pull the lightsaber to him. And he's kind of struggling, and then it finally comes out, and he, he's thinking, oh, finally. And it flies past, almost hitting him in the face, and flies straight into Rey's hand. And you can tell she's just as astounded. And then they go into what they specifically, the director and whatnot, specifically said was an unchoreographed fight between Kylo and her. In the simple sense, they wanted to make a point that Rey is not trained. She's never wielded a lightsaber before. But at the same note, the whole idea is the Force is guiding her and protecting her from Kylo. And like even the sequences, I know he told me the first time we watched it together that he loved the fact that these trees are falling down and all this. They added that in after. The original scene, that didn't happen. But thankfully they listened to somebody who reviewed the footage and was like, no, we need to add these trees getting chopped down and stuff. So they rendered those in. And then you get to basically, he's telling her she needs to have a teacher. He's basically holding her at the edge of a cliff.
He says the word Force, and she's like, oh yeah, I can tap into that.
So then you see her, it almost looks like she clears her mind, just brings it all in, and then she gets a look of determination. But
there's anger.
The downside is she defeats him using her anger. She literally turns her anger, and you can tell it's more powerful than his.
And there's a moment in the novel where at that point she's standing there over him after I thought she cut off his hand, but all she did was hit
The emitter.
the emitter, and cut his face, which they changed the design for because it goes across his face here, and then it's just up and down his eye for the Last Jedi. But in the novel, she's standing over him, and she hears this voice on the wind, essentially telling her to kill him, and you're never told who.
Foreshadowing.
You're never told who is doing it, but it's alluded to that this is Snoke. And I had always thought in that kind of context, that's how Snoke got to Ben. But you made some
we
comments
some stuff
during there that it seems that they're more familiar with Snoke than we realize.
Yeah, there's that. We'll discuss it in the predictions. There's going to be a long conversation on it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because I think I kind of converted him to my idea.
I can at least see where his ideas are coming from. I'll put it that way.
Now, they do actually talk about that there was a lot of discussion as to whether they were going to have her kill him, or whether they would just both give up and run, or she'd capture him. In this commentary, they discussed it. And they said, no, we felt the best thing would be to leave it completely open as to what would have happened there by basically just splitting the planet, drawing them apart.
I think if you killed him here, it wastes a good villain like the waste of Darth Maul.
Yeah.
But that's just my thoughts on that thinking. But I like the fight, and I thought it was like he's shot in the hip, dying from that. He is injured in his shoulder, and he has her on the run throughout the whole bit of it
until she accepts the Force.
She accepts the Force. She maybe takes it a little dark, which we'll talk about a little bit more in The Last Jedi.
She is more so, I'm going to say it, she is more so Anakin Skywalker than Ben is. She had the same kind of life that he did before he was brought into the Jedi.
I can get that. She's slave to her circumstances. I can get that. But yeah, I can get behind that. And overall, I enjoyed this film, and I can't think of any other major topic that we need that can be talked that isn't better served in either The Last Jedi or talking about the Rise of Skywalker. Do you have anything else that you can think of that is better served here?
I mean, for me, the movie kind of was the starting process for repairing kind of the damage. I mean, for me, Star Wars was my childhood.
The very first line was, "This should begin to make things right."
Yeah, but
it's one of my top 3 Star Wars films, straight up.
I mean, we've discussed in prior videos, my feelings on things and how they were, and how I had a lot of hesitation going into this. This movie did start on getting me into this new series, and the new films in general, because it's like, for me, Star Wars was my childhood. It's what I grew up with. It was my escape. It was also one of the things that I knew everything about it. I read all the books that I could get my hands on. I knew more than anybody else I knew. I researched. I played almost every game I could get my hands on, and then we had everything I knew was stripped away.
And 2 years later...
So you can ask him. I was like, he's like, oh, we're going to go see this. And I'm just like...
It's not...
I'm like, well, I'll go see it. I don't really care. I'm not going to like it. I did. I really enjoyed it, especially the military. They brought more of a military aspect to the First Order, as opposed to the Empire, where it was just like Vader, some stormtroopers. I love Vader, favorite villain. And then that followed on, once I saw Rogue One, it's like, I think that gulf was, filled. I mean, there's been a few other little problems, but for the most part, I'm into it now.
With that being said, I enjoyed it. Andrew's enjoyed it. You can always... Actually, you know what? Leave us a comment below. Tell us what you thought about the I almost called it The Last Skywalker here for a second.
We're not there yet.
For The Force Awakens. Tell us, what do you think of Rey, Kylo, Finn, Poe? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, you can follow me at Mr. Knows Reviews on Twitter. Where can they find you online there, Mr. Andrew? Anywhere? Just the Xbox?
Yeah.
I think I'm this close to getting him back on Twitter. We'll see.
Nah, I don't do no. I'm trying to get out there. I recently actually went on Mixer, I think, and
Oh yes, you're streaming now.
I don't have a cam. I don't really have anything to say, but I actually streamed for like 6 hours on The Witcher without any followers. But I'm trying to get into this. He's getting me into it. I'm thinking of starting maybe some of my own little series, but those are a little down the line and are going to take a little money, which I don't have right now. So, but Obsidian is my gamer tag for Xbox Live. I work too much to really play anything.
Well, we do what we can, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have anything to say, go ahead and let us know. And until next time, have a great night.